Shame and guilt. So shame and guilt are two massive monsters under the bed. And I don't believe for 1 second that my soul or my higher self, or however you want to think of it, the person, the me that is my truest me, that is not this body, that is, you know, kind of playing this body like it's a video game, but that because I've got this human brain, I don't necessarily know what that higher self is thinking or expects of me, but all the time. But um I do not believe for 1 second that my higher self is feeling shame or guilt over the things in my life that I might feel shame and guilt about. And I do not believe for 1 second that your higher self or your soul feels shame and guilt over the things that you probably feel shame and guilt about. Now, I do believe that there are times when shame and guilt can be used as tools because it feels so terrible because of the terrible things we've done, mostly to ourselves, but of course we've done horrible things to other people as well. And then that shame and that guilt stops us from doing it again and may even be the thing that gets us to get our act together. Okay, that's good and fine. However, when it's not being used as a tool, it is being used as a weapon against you. That's that is just a fact, my friend. If you're not using the shame and guilt as a tool for change and growth, then it is devouring you from the inside. Okay, the way I see it, we are consciousness. We are an experiment that we're basically like God's experiment to experience this, right? You are God's experiment to experiment as to see what it's like to be you, right? So there are no mistakes, there are no errors, there are no wrong choices in experiments in consciousness. So you might say, well, Alana, if there's no wrong choices or mistakes or errors, then why can't I just like do meth until I like make myself basically go crazy? And I would say, well, friend, you can. But do you want to? Is that going to be pleasant for you? You know, I'd like to believe that we are moving into a new age, not the new age, but a new age. And that we're on an upswing, and that a lot of the awful things that we're experiencing now in the world are the tension of that big shift that's happening. And with any kind of big shift that happens, like think about you and your life. Usually it takes, at least for me, um, well, maybe not so much these days, but in the past, it takes things getting really uncomfortable and really just like, before I'll make the change, you know? And I think that's a very human quality. And so if we're thinking about there being a massive shift in human consciousness and it's going to be a big change, we're going to get like real yucky. It's going to feel gross before we and finally change, you know, because it's hard enough for one person to change, let alone the entire planet. So again, take what resonates with you and leave the rest. Back to shame and guilt. So is that shame, is that guilt serving you? Or is it weighing you down? You know, I could forever feel ashamed of all the just gross ways I acted when I was drunk. Like some of them I remember, some of them I don't and never did remember. Some of them I don't just because they were so long ago, but some of them I don't because I never did because I was in a blackout state and I was not, my hands were not on the wheel. Um, you know, but I have looked at my shame and looked in those dark places and forgiven myself. So that's what I recommend that you do, really. Look in all the places inside yourself where you have those little pockets of shame and guilt. Like, are you holding on to shame and guilt that even maybe your parents handed down to you? Are you holding on to shame and guilt that other people projected onto you? Are you holding on to shame and guilt for things you did when you were fucked up, when you were blacked out, when you were so high, whatever? Or are you holding on to shame and guilt for things you did when you were really angry, you know, or in a bad relationship? Are you holding on to shame and guilt from poor choices you made when you were grieving or, you know, when you were just vulnerable in some way, or, you know, your state of mind was compromised? I'm I'm going to continue saying this over and over again. It is really, really hard to be a human on planet Earth right now. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering. We have generations and generations of pain and suffering that is weighing us down. Generations and generations of inherited shame and guilt, sadness, loss, all these things that are very heavy. And it feels to me like we have collectively decided now is the time. We're done holding that. We're done carrying that for our ancestors. They don't want us to carry it anymore. We don't want to carry it anymore. It's over. So, this is another time when I invite you to go within yourself. Look at those parts and pieces of yourself. And maybe even do this. Go in there, find those parts and pieces, and say something like, I'm sorry that you harmed that person, or I'm sorry that you felt cornered. I'm sorry that you caused so much harm when you were blacked out drunk. I'm sorry that you hurt your family members when you stole money from them. I'm sorry that you got so angry that you lashed out at the people you love most. You know, just really go in there and apologize to the parts of yourself, and also acknowledge those parts. I see you. I see that you harmed other people. I see that you harmed yourself. I see that. It's okay. I forgive you. I forgive you. I'm sorry that you hurt people and now you're sad. I'm very sorry. You know, I'm not really a person who throws around the phrase I'm sorry that much. I think that it can be used so frequently that it causes a sort of like shrinking in people, like they actually become sorry. And I don't like that. I think we are here to shine. And even if we have reasons to be sorry, we can be humble and still shine. And so we don't have to beat ourselves up anymore. We can shift that. We can get out of those ruts of shame and guilt and acknowledge what we've done. I mean, we've all done awful things, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It's just the nature of being human, and maybe you did an awful thing yesterday. Okay, well, look at that awful thing, you know, figure it out, forgive yourself, and then don't do it again, you know? And we're working on the other stuff here in this program. We're working on the emotional stuff, and we're working on the subconscious stuff, and we're working on the energetic stuff. And this is only week 2. So I'm trying not to like bum rush you with all of the stuff right from the gate, but we got to get in there and we got to shine a light on these things. It's time. Okay. It's time that you look at the dark spots in there where you're holding and carrying the weight of shame and guilt. And maybe you're carrying shame and guilt for things people did to you. Okay. And I'm not asking you to forgive them. I mean, you can, that's helpful, but but I'm asking you to stop carrying the shame and guilt from the things that they did to you. I'm asking you to forgive yourself for putting yourself in unsafe situations. I'm asking you to just really let yourself off the hook. You're here. So, for whatever reason you're here, you want to change something. And so you can forgive yourself now. I give you permission. Now you got to give yourself permission. All right, my beautiful friend. I love you so much. You're very precious. You're perfect. Even with all the ugly things you've done in your whole life, in lifetimes, and all the lifetimes you've existed, you're precious and perfect just the way you are.